All right. Brittany, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. All right, well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our February Austin Tug. My name is Chris Monahan. I'll be your MC today. We are here live broadcasting from Tableau office here in downtown Austin. We got a truly hybrid event for you planned today. So we got a lot of people that are right here in the room. Let me share their faces. There we go. Hey, everybody, wave. All right. Got a couple more people trickling in here, so we'll give them just a few minutes, but we'll go ahead and get started. So we got a fun event planned for you today, but before we get started, I always want to thank everybody that helped put this event together, and that's our Tug Advisory Council. These are the great folks that work hard every month and help organize this event. Everything, the logistics from doing these hybrid events to lining up our speakers to coming up with the great ideas for presentations. That's all. These are all the people behind the scenes. If you like doing some of that stuff and you're interested in joining our team, please let us know. Come to me after the event or reach out to me via email. We'd love to get you involved. If you're big into marketing or event planning or you just know a lot of people, come on, let me know and we'll have you join our council. So as far as our agenda today, we'll go through some meeting notes and talk about some upcoming events, but then we got two great speakers. And as I mentioned, we got a truly hybrid event today. So Brittany Rosenau, who is a senior analyst from JLL, she will be giving a presentation today about data entry to data analyst and how that helped her sort of level up her career. And then we have Ben Goodman, who's the lead solutions engineer from Tableau, who's going to be giving a presentation around Tableau content promotion and how you use that in the life cycle of development. So it truly is hybrid in that Brittany is remote and Ben is here in person, in the flesh. We have a live speaker in the flesh. So we're using the technology making it happen. So we have a meeting format here. Again, this is a live meeting, so it is virtual. So if you're in virtual mode, go ahead and put in gallery view. If you're here in person, smile, because you might be on camera, okay? So just please participate using the chat window. If you have any comments and you're virtual, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you have any questions for our speaker, send it over to Homer directly, and he can collect some of those questions and post them for our speakers. We'll also put a short survey as well. Fill that out so that helps us improve these events. So it's a quick survey. And that's it. So I do want to mention some general housekeeping announcements. We have Tableau Conference coming up. In case you've never heard of Tableau Conference, it's the biggest event of the year for data. And that's where everybody meets up and they talk about all things Tableau. So it's going to be 3 days in Vegas. It's going to be awesome. If you can't make it, you can also join virtually, which is also a great experience. They had a lot of great virtual speakers last year as well. So either way, please register. You can go there and register. I got the link down below. In addition, some of y'all that maybe aren't from Austin don't know, but we have this little tiny thing called South by Southwest that invades Austin every year. And so that's a big event for us. Slack, which is part of the larger Salesforce community, is putting on a Slack community social. That's going to be here in the Tableau Austin office, right where we are now. And that's going to be March 14th. So if you're interested, please register. They gave us a really easy URL to remember. It's down below. So take a snapshot right now if you're virtual and you can register, or just Google this and you can find it. All right. So those are our housekeeping announcements, Tableau Conference, and also our Slack community social. We also have a couple upcoming tugs. So we have one coming up on March 9th, right before spring break here in Texas. And then we have 2 more planned for April and May. So stay tuned for those invites and we'll send those out in a couple weeks. Last announcement, for those that are here, we have a happy hour. It's going to be across the street at Caroline's upstairs. It's easy to find. We'll all be moving there. So if you are virtual, you still have time. Come on. We have an hour to kill. So maybe if you're in Georgetown, you can still make it. So please try to attend our event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Brittany Rosenau, who's, again, a senior analyst at JLL, part of the JLL community, we have a lot of speakers that speak at our event here. And as I mentioned, she's going to give a presentation about how, her career was changed with data. So Brittany, I'd like to turn that over to you.
Alrighty. Let me share my screen.
And before we get started too, I forgot to mention that Brittany is, a Tableau Public ambassador, but she's also a finalist for this year's Iron Viz. So I think we might have her congratulations, Brittany. We might have her give a presentation on that experience maybe later on in the year. So Brittany, go ahead.
Alrighty, well, as it says on the tin, the presentation today is from Data Entry to Data Analyst and how I used community projects to level up my career. We'll just dive right into it. Oop, too fast. There we go. So what we're going to cover is my path from a job in data entry to my current job as a senior data analyst at JLL. We're going to go behind the scenes of the process of creating my entry for this year's Iron Viz. Hopefully next year I'll be back breaking down my winning Iron Viz, but we'll have to wait for that one. And then we'll also go through how to apply learnings on the job. And at the end, there'll be time for some Q&A. This little graph here that you're seeing, or maybe big on the big projector screen, is a timeline of everything I've published on Tableau Public through 2022, colored by what category of event it falls into. So you'll see there's some ups, some downs, and I'm going to have this graph throughout the presentation as we go through the timeline of my career development. So keep an eye out for that. So to kick things off, how I got started in Tableau. At the job I was at, I was working as a data quality specialist, which meant that we didn't allow salespeople to do data entry into Salesforce because they're not always very good at it. So we had a team, including myself, that was responsible for updating records on accounts in Salesforce, keeping that kind of data clean. It involved a certain amount of reporting, and they had a data champion program that would let users get access to Tableau's web edit feature so that other people could learn how to use Tableau without having to pay for a full desktop license to people that are just want to try some things out. So that's how I got started in Tableau. I was hooked because I could make reports a lot faster and a lot more interactive than I could in Salesforce reports. And then there were some internal data challenges where there's some friendly competition just internally. And that's where I wanted to use custom things like shapes, lots of crazy colors. And that's why I downloaded Tableau Public, so that I could have sort of the desktop version to play around with all the stuff that's not business best practice. So my first Tableau Public viz was the line chart, because that was the prompt for that data challenge. And at the time I ran an Instagram of dogs, and so I made little like emojis for each dog and made it as like a custom shape. Absolutely ridiculous. Would not recommend it for business applications, but it was those kind of things that really got me hooked into the tool and just seeing what was possible building in Tableau. Later, about a couple months later, there just so happened to be a Data Plus Moon event that was across the street from our office. And I thought, well, I'll go to that since it's after work. It's right there. I don't really have an excuse not to go. And this was really my introduction to the greater Tableau community. I'd used Tableau internally, but wasn't really aware of what was going on externally. And even Murray was one of the presenters there. I had dialed into some of the Makeover Monday conversations. And this presentation was really inspiring for me because some of the takeaways were, don't let your current title define what you can or can't do. You don't have to be a subject matter expert to make vizzes, or you can use your subject matter expertise to make vizzes. But the key way is like, you don't have to be a doctor to help people with data. You can use what you have. So this is how I got started participating in Makeover Monday. That was pretty much all I did in Tableau at that time. And I was starting to share that work on Twitter, but also on LinkedIn. And it was really interesting that as soon as I started sharing some of that work on LinkedIn, people in my own company that I'd never really talked to would see it on LinkedIn and then approach me saying like, hey, I think what you're doing in Tableau is really cool. So that was really interesting to kind of see that feedback cycle come through. Practicing and sharing on social led to some great things for me because other people saw that I was excited about data. I was excited about learning more, and I was kind of learning new things as I went along. And so that led to being able to interview for a role that would get me out of doing data entry and into more data specific things on the BI team. And so I was able to interview and use the skills that I had learned from participating in Makeover Monday to take a position as a business intelligence engineer, focusing on data quality. So it was cool because I was able to use the data quality aspects of my last role, use the practice and analytics that I had used from participating in community projects to translate it to a new role within the same company, which was a really great opportunity. And it was one of those things that since I proved that I could pick up a tool quickly, they were more willing to take a chance on, okay, Brittany doesn't know everything yet, but she's shown that she can pick up something new quickly and can learn. I continued participating in community projects, learned to steal like an artist, Tableau Public, if you're not using it already. Even if you don't ever publish anything, there's so much content out there that you can just download, break apart, see what other people have done, use some calculations, use some design things that you might like, and apply it to your own work internally. By doing this, I was able to kind of just get better at doing data visualizations, but there was also a time where, you know, we didn't have an analyst available for every single team at our company. But when it came to, you know, this team had a problem, I was able to say like, oh, I've actually seen a dashboard used for that on Tableau Public. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it would take to implement it in our organization. And was able to, you know, save teams lots of time by stealing from what other people have already done, which is super helpful. At this time, I also was able to transition to analytics engineering, which is a bit of a new title these days, but focusing a lot on the pipeline of like creating those curated data sets for other people to do analysis on. And I also was able to co-lead the Data Champion program, which was really exciting for me because it was the program that got me started in Tableau and analytics in the first place. Later down the line, I actually, and this was really interesting when I visited because I didn't realize there was this shift, but I did start branching out from Makeover Monday data sets and started using my own and started looking at things that were interesting to me. I don't know how many of you were on TikTok at any point in the last year, but there was a pug that the owner would lift up. And if the pug kind of like slumped down, it was a no bones day and you were supposed to take it easy on yourself. If the pug, you know, was perky, then it was a bones day. And I thought, well, this would be fun to make a calendar. So I learned how to make a calendar in Tableau just because of a TikTok I saw that I thought was interesting. Doing those data sets kind of helped me get better at curating my own data sets instead of using what someone else had already prepared for me. That kind of work and practice helped my internal work as I was starting to administer the Tableau server. But this was also a time when I was thinking like, well, maybe I don't want to be the server admin. I want to actually do this analyst stuff full time formally. So I started looking at different analyst roles. And that's when I found that my Tableau Public profile, because I had this body of work over the last couple of years where I was publishing fairly frequently, really helped in the job search because when people ask, well, what can you do? I'm able to point to my Tableau Public profile and say, here's where I started, here's what I can do today. And that's where I got to join JLL, which was super exciting. So on to the next part, behind the Viz. Spiel des Jahres was my theme this year. It's a German board game competition, and we'll just go right into it. So Iron Viz, one of those non-Makeover Monday things I participated in. The motto is kind of win or learn, you can't lose. It's a month-long challenge Tableau announces the topic, and you've got a month to get the data, build out a viz, do whatever you'd like with it, and submit. It's a really great chance to try out things that you might not be able to do internally at work. Doing these kind of like long form vizzes, I think if I sent one of these to a stakeholder, they would be like, no, I just need my numbers. So it's really great to have these opportunities to look at data in different ways. So these are the 3 different times that I've participated in Iron Viz. The first time was, the topic was just do something that brings you joy. At the time, it was one of my favorite podcasts where I took a look and figured out how many episodes fit into these different categories. The following year, you can see it's maybe not the best out of the 3, but at this time I was doing some traveling and also interviewing for a new role, but I still wanted to participate, so I thought, well, I'm just going to enter anyways for the experience, and if someone takes a look at it and says, well, I bet I could do better, then I would take that as a win, because I think the more people that participate, the better these community projects are. And on the right is my final submission for this year, which we'll get into. So phase 1, and I'm going to go less about like the technical stuff and more kind of high level design, what I was thinking throughout the process. So phase 1 was the topic. The topic they announced was games, which threw me for a loop a little bit. There's not a sport right now that I'm super passionate about, so I had to think, well, what other game could I find data on? I had a vacation booked, so I had to decide, do I want to do Tableau on the vacation or not? I decided not, which was really great because it kind of gave me time to step away and just kind of let things simmer for a little bit. And at first I was going to do one game, but I couldn't figure out like what story to tell. So I zoomed out a bit and thought, well, why do I have the games that I have? And for me, I spent significantly more time with family in 2020 for reasons. And I was trying to figure out, well, what new board games can I buy to kind of spice things up a little bit? And I realized they had this Spiel des Jahres award in common. And so I thought, well, that's something I can dig into. That's something I've got a personal connection to. Let's go with that. Phase 2, figuring out my story and figuring out the design. You can tell it's pretty sparse at this point, but I was figuring out like, okay, how do I want to actually tell this story? I gave up on my idea of like a horizontal layout and thought, no, I think logically, like top to bottom, like reading an article, I'll just lay it out like that. Started throwing some initial charts together, just trying to see if anything stuck out. And then I picked my colors pretty early. A previous year, I had used like 8 colors, and that was really challenging to work with. So I knew I wanted something more limited. So I picked the colors that the awards used and just stuck with that and went forward. At this phase, one thing that I learned from previous years is that even if getting feedback initially might be scary, it really helps the development process and helps iterate, and people will see things that you don't after staring at something for far too long. So I solicited advice from friends. I had some coworkers that I bounced around ideas with, and then there was the Iron Viz feedback initiative run by Sarah Bartlett, which was really helpful. Basically, you sign up for a 15-minute time slot, you get 4 people that are looking at your viz, and you just get feedback. And I used that twice this year, which was really helpful. Everyone was super nice and really helped kind of say, yes, this is too simple. No, it's not too simple. Simple is good. Or, maybe try this different chart type. And it really helped kind of clarify my thinking and not get too much in my own head about things. And then phase 4, sweating the details. This is where participating in Makeover Monday kind of really helped because listening to all those feedback sessions, I was able to apply feedback from Makeover Monday vizzes to my own Iron Viz. So, if you've got a question on your viz, does your viz answer it? hover over everything, make sure that, the tooltips read like something that people want to read instead of your default field names. Did you actually do an analysis, or are you just showing someone what data there is? So this was kind of just crunch time, making sure all your filters work. A lot of the same things that you might think of before you push your own dashboard into production. Phase 5 is profit. Just kidding. But like I said, win or learn, you can't lose. Obviously, it worked out well for me this year, but even if I hadn't, I would still be just as excited to participate in it again. I learned a lot of different technical skills this year. I used parameters in ways that I hadn't before. I got to use different chart types that I had never built out before. I also became more comfortable with asking for feedback, which, while it's great for a community project, that also helps me get more comfortable asking for feedback at work too. And then, because of this, big thing, there's over 200 new Vizes out there that anyone can explore, crack open, and get inspiration from, which I think is really cool. So that's all great, but why does it matter to you? Here's kind of what I think are some great takeaways. There's so much inspiration out there. What I find interesting might not be what you find interesting. But the more you kind of look and see what's out there, the more you'll think like, oh, hey, I saw someone do this thing before. I can download it and figure out how to apply it to what I'm working on. Practice makes more perfect. Makeover Monday data sets, sometimes they're interesting, sometimes they're not. But being able to practice with those has made me faster at jumping into data sets I'm not familiar with on the job as well, because I've gotten used to like, okay, this is how I crack open a data set. Here's how I explore things. Doing that exploration on the side has made me faster at doing that exploration at work. Having a public portfolio, the job market is what it is these days. If you've got a Tableau Public or any sort of other online portfolio, it'll really help you stand out to build your own credibility. And it also kind of creates documentation for your future self. There's been times when I need to know how to do something, and then I remember, oh, right, I did that before. Let me go find that workbook where I, tried this thing out. And then also learning how to give and receive feedback is obviously a soft skill that can be used at work as well. And the other screenshots I've got on here that I think is important is, as you're participating in things, find the people that really cheer you on and keep them around. Not everyone will be as excited about the same things you are, and that's okay. But here I've got a note that I'd gotten from Nick and the analysts after I had done one of the internal challenges. And it was something that, when I was getting bored with data entry, I looked at that and was like, okay, they think I can do it, so I'm going to keep going. Keep those little notes of encouragement, make yourself a little brag book, put the emails where someone said you did a good job into a folder. And then you've got that to reference when there might be a little dip. Links I find useful. Your mileage might vary. I'll see if I can get these slides out so you can click on these and reference them later. But there's a list of community projects, a couple blogs that I find really helpful for learning storytelling with data and how to approach different things. And then I've also got my own bookmarks where I just word a bunch of things on resources for colors, chart types, how to give and receive feedback, et cetera, et cetera. But those are really boring to look at on a slide. So that's all I have today.
All right. Well, thanks, Brittany. That's amazing. Hey, all right. You get instant feedback. Those virtual class we used to do, you're getting the real stuff here. So, so that is amazing. And I think the topic at hand is very relevant as we all are trying to advance our data careers. And it's amazing how you took just an interest or a passion, right? And sort of, and turn that, to advance your career as well. So that's amazing. So just to recap for everybody. So Brittany, you're saying you learned Tableau just 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, three and a half-ish, something like that, yeah.
Okay. And now you're going to be giving a presentation at Iron Viz in front of 8,000 people.
I'm already sweating.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. That is amazing. That is amazing. So I guess for those that are starting off, you had some of those useful links. Are there some other ones that you really focused on at the very beginning to get up to speed, just to get some traction or learn some best practices?
Yeah, so Makeover Monday right now is hosted on their site, but there's also 2 videos that go on usually during the week. Andy Kriebel does a Watch Me Viz where he, vizzes the data live, and then later in the week, Eva does a Viz review, kind of giving feedback. And at the beginning, people would be sharing links or just watching someone do Tableau on a screen. I was able to pick up different things and get different links that people were using kind of in real time. The Tableau community blog has got a lot of really great resources. I would subscribe to that because every Friday there's a roundup of links of what people have been doing in the community. And there's a lot of great blogs that are featured there. And then for some like general data viz stuff, Data Wrapper has some really good kind of do's and don'ts for chart types that have pictures that I find really helpful. But I can send you those links.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we'll send your links out to the rest of the community here after the presentation. Homer, do we have any questions?
We don't have any in the chat, but I have one.
Yeah.
Brittany, in your learning journey, could you point to like a particular feature set or an aspect of making business with Tableau that you found maybe a little bit harder to implement, harder to learn, harder to manipulate than others? And what resources did you have that were helpful in getting over the hump?
Yeah, I like to say Tableau is as easy and as hard as drag and drop, right? So there's kind of the easy stuff, and then you get stuck. There's been multiple times when I've gotten stuck. Lately, one that's finally clicked for me is parameters. I just never really had gotten the hang of them, and so I avoided them at all costs. And then there was something that I really wanted to use it for, and I've honestly just relied a lot on Google, and there's a lot of people that have done blog write-ups or shown step-by-step examples already. And I was able to find one that just resonated with me. Another one that was really threw me for a loop was how to use containers in Tableau. And there's a video out there. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's called something like Everything I Know About Tableau Containers. It's like a half-hour video on YouTube. And watching that really unlocked stuff for me, and how I whiz through containers like it's no problem. But there's definitely always one day I'll really crack LODs, but that's still a little bit of a pain point for me.
Yeah, those trip up everybody. Don't worry, those are good. Sort of along those lines, are there any favorite techniques that you like to use a lot or incorporate into your designs? Is there like a favorite technique, like your go-to?
Yes, there's one. I might be able to show it live.
Okay.
Let me see here 1 second, because of course I've got Tableau up.
We're going
Okay,
off script, guys.
So
this is good.
we're going off script.
This is
We're
where
doing
things
it
get
live.
interesting. Yeah.
Bear with me. Okay. Can everyone see my Tableau Public screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So here's a thing that I find annoying is that I want to change the color of my bars, but I want to pick from like a color palette that I already have. I don't like using this. So I'll make a dummy field, and I use this constantly, is I'll double click up in the top here, single quote, I'll type the name called color and end quote, and then I'll hit enter, and it adds this color field. and then I'll drag this onto color. And now when I click color, edit colors, I've got the color palette available. I can
Nice.
go in there, change it to, you know, whatever I want. And then I can get my color palettes instead of having to deal with the like sliders and stuff.
I like that
So
one.
that's-
Saves a couple
That's
clicks.
probably one I use all the time.
Very cool. Very cool. Any questions from our audience? Yeah.
Hello, Brittany. My name is Joe. And that graph that you showed at the bottom of almost every slide, is that just a bar graph, or I'm just trying to figure out like how that, what is it?
How did you make that?
How
Yeah.
did you
I make that. That is so Ken Flerlich has a Tableau Public stats service that I was able to pull my Tableau Public data from, and go. I'm going very off script. Doing it live again. So here is the Viz. So it is so I've got years and month across the bottom. Aggregate number of vises is the rows, but then I've got the title of the viz on detail, and so that's what gets the separation of the lines there to make it a unit chart. So if we take this off, you'll see it just turns into like regular bars. And then if I put title again on detail, you'll see it switch to little units. So if you make a bar chart and then put whatever your like lowest level of detail category is on there, you'll get this nice little unit chart looking thing.
But it has to be a unique level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, and in this case, luckily, each viz has a different title. Otherwise, I would have to use a different unique identifier to get those little squares.
Okay. Very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, Brittany, thank you very much. Everybody give Brittany a round of applause. Brittany, thank you very much. And we wish you luck at the Iron Viz. So we'll see you in Vegas. Good luck.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So that was amazing. That was really cool and really special. I saw some of her Tableau Public. If you haven't seen it, it's really cool. Check it out. So our next speaker is, as I mentioned, live and in the flesh here. We have this truly, he flew in all the way from Chicago. No joke, guys. So he's here. Ben Goodman, our lead solution engineer here at Tableau, and he's going to go through best practices around content publishing. So this is something I'm sure all y'all deal with on a daily basis. So it's very relevant to probably your daily roles at your job. So let's give a round of applause to Ben. Ben? All right. We'll swap here.
Oh, we don't need that? Okay. Oh, perfect.
Very good.
So share that.
There's-
There we go. Yeah. Close Slack before you start sharing. I don't think there was anything bad up there. So really glad to be here today. I am, as Chris mentioned, a lead solutions engineer here for Tableau, and I've the last year worked with state and local government here in Texas. So happy to be here. Always great to come down to the great state of Texas. especially when it's a little cold up in Chicago. It's a nice change of temperature. By the way, Brittany, great work. All the stuff you show is amazing. Best of luck to you. Really excited anytime I see what folks are working on and hear about their journeys with Tableau. So the thing I'm going to be talking about at face value is maybe not as exciting as my predecessor here. But I'm standing between you and happy hour, so you have to pay attention and get through it so we can all have drinks after this. What I'm going to be talking about is Tableau content promotion and lifecycle. Now, this is something that became really important to me in my career before I joined Tableau. I was in charge of data and analytics platforms at Motorola Solutions, and I needed to figure out how we were going to clean up our server. So before I get started, forward-looking statements, anything you hear here, it's just for this presentation. There's no non-public information in this, et cetera, et cetera. There's me. So the challenge that I faced when I started there was that we had a lot of people that were excited about Tableau. They were publishing visualizations, cool dashboards. We had a lot of activity going on, but we didn't have a lot of organization around what was happening. So we would end up where we had different versions of dashboards and reports, or data sources even, where it wasn't clear which one was our production version, where sometimes people were working on the same thing, going in two different directions, and you weren't sure, okay, this one is giving me different information than this one, what's right? So in order to address that, as a certified Scrum Master, I was like, well, let's get agile with this. Let's improve this process. So you'll notice some of these principles in what I'm going to be talking about today. This, I think, mostly server admins will probably find this more interesting, but this will apply to anybody using Tableau. So as I go through, kind of think about how your environment's set up and maybe some of these steps that you can potentially take to help clean things up, make it clear what roles and responsibilities are, and really facilitate smooth content promotion on the platform. So there's several pieces that are going to be part of this content promotion. I'm going to talk briefly about sites versus projects, users, roles, and groups, project groups, and permissions, and then additional considerations after that. So those first three things are really going to work together to enable you to promote content seamlessly in Tableau. So before we get started, why are we doing this? There's three key things we want to think about when we think about how we're going to set this up. What are we trying to accomplish? What do our users want? And then most importantly, what are your requirements? A lot of us have Sarbanes-Oxley involved in some of what we're doing, or other regulations or security concerns around our information and our data. So that needs to be part of it as well. In my case, I had segregation of duties that came into this, particularly important when we talk about roles and permissions. So we'll start at the very high level, sites and projects. Now, this is kind of an old debate. It's been around for a while. Initially, when you had multiple projects, maybe you had different groups, we would typically break things up by sites. And sites are going to work as silos. What that means is site A and site B will never communicate with each other. They never share data sources or content. They're going to be completely separate, which is good if you want to keep those things completely separate. But when we start talking about a more integrated sharing environment, we really start to turn to a different approach to this, and that's using projects to organize our data. I think it was about 5 years ago when we had nested projects introduced to Tableau, where you could really start building hierarchies inside your structure in Tableau. And that solved one of the things that we used to use sites for, where we had maybe a group and they had multiple projects under that group. Now, instead of having a site for every group, we can have a main project and then sub-projects underneath it. Now, why is this important when we're talking about difference between sites and projects, and particularly when it comes to content promotion? So if we have a development site and we have a production site, we're going to have a challenge because those are two siloed sites. They don't talk to each other. They don't even share users. They have a system user that might exist on both, but the user could have different roles on different sites. When we have a system user, they have that one role. They could be a creator on site A and then a viewer on site B. Now this gets to be a problem if they're an owner of content and they can't control that content when it moves. When we use one site with multiple projects to promote content, now we have one user, one site role. So we don't have to worry about those kind of conflicts when we take content and promote it. The next big thing is the difference between sites and projects as an approach. Since these are silos, if we want to move something from site A to site B, it's not going to work. You can't move things directly from site A to site B. If you want to do this, instead what you have to do is open up Tableau Desktop, download that content from site A, and then publish it back up to site B. And then if you're treating this as a move, you need to go back and clean up the original content from site A. Now, this gets to be problematic when we start to look at things like history. If we want to retain what were the views on this, what was the usage over time, what does the performance look like? If we have things like revision history, anytime we republish to a new site, we're going to lose all of that information. So if we want to go back and see how something performed prior to going to production, as well as after, you're not going to be able to do it. So this is another reason to avoid using sites when you're promoting content like this. Also, if you've scheduled any tasks like extract refresh or subscriptions, those will be lost and need to be created as well on the new site. So if we're using projects to do this, we've got project A and project B here. We can simply go out to the content we want, click those three ellipses, and go to move, and we move that content over. Done. Very easy. Instead of having to download that, publish it back up, make sure all the permissions stay intact, subscriptions, extract refreshes. We don't have to rebuild any of that. It retains everything that it has. Another great thing about it, it will retain the same URL. So if you bookmark that in your browser, that bookmark is going to stay the same. It's in a different project now, but the actual content, you won't have to recreate those bookmarks. And of course, we've retained our scheduled tasks and history. So we'll take a look at what this looks like if we want to talk about how we organize our projects so that we can facilitate moving content around. Now, in this case, I've got a project called Operations. This would be what I would consider the top level project. And there are a few alternate approaches you can take to this, but they're all going to follow a similar structure. And the structure is this. Typically, when you look at change controls, you have a development, a user acceptance phase, and then a production phase. I wanted to keep things as simple as possible in my environment. So what I did was I chose to make whatever our project was, whatever our top level project was, that was production. Anything residing in that directory or that project directly, that was considered production. Now, if it was in development or UAT or QA, if you want, those were not production. So you knew really quickly if you went out and looked at content, you could see where it was and you could see, okay, this is not production. I should not take this as fact and I shouldn't make any important decisions based off of it because it hasn't been validated yet. So these are all based on what phase these things are at in the life cycle. Now, luckily, I only had 3 phases to my life cycle. I've seen up to 7 or even 9, depending on how robust you are. So you can always have Dev 1, Dev 2, UAT, QA, go up the list. You could make this an approach with as many phases as you like. We're just going to talk about these 3 because these are primarily, I think, where most of us would fall when it comes to promoting this stuff. So this is my preferred approach. I just mentioned that top level is going to be our main project. That's going to be typically, if it's named after a department that maybe owns that project or a specific vertical or area of expertise. That's going to be that top one. And then underneath, we'll have our user acceptance testing or staging, and then our development. So an important note here, when we talk about setting up projects, you don't want to do this a million times. Save yourself some work. The default project, any new project you create, is going to be based on your default project. So set permissions, make sure it's structured how you want any new project to be structured. So that way, when you create a new project, it's going to have whatever is in default. I highly recommend not putting in the actual content in default and just using it as a template. It's up to you. But yeah, make sure that you set up defaults so you don't have to redo this work every time you create a new project. And there it is, a default project. Everybody's got it on your server. It's the first one that shows up. Next, users, roles, and groups. So when we talk about segregation of duties, right, this is where this is going to be really important. We don't want all our users going in and modifying production reports. We hopefully don't want anyone modifying production reports, only development reports or things that are in UAT for review. So this will be important to establish what role an individual is in so that they only have the ability to do what is in their responsibility set. We also want to make sure they have the appropriate skill set. We want to make sure that anybody creating content has some level of competency when it comes to creating content. They have access to data and those kind of things. And we also want to make sure that based on these groups, they have the resources that they need. So if we have issues, we want to make sure that our creators have the ability to go out and create cases with Tableau if they run into issues, or internal resources as well. And then lastly, too, who's going to see the content? In my case, we made pretty much everybody viewers unless it was sensitive data, but you can determine who the appropriate audience is and assign them to a group. So 3 main roles that that I used, and you can always use more if you want to, but I try to keep things as simple as possible. The first one is the project leader. So this project leader is going to be the person who owns the project. They own production, and if something bad goes into production, that project leader is responsible for it. They're the only one who can change production. So usually they're the project leader or a project manager that's responsible for that content. They also are responsible for determining who can create new content that they'll review before it goes up to their main production layer. Content developers, those are the folks that are going to be out there creating reports. They're going to be doing development. They're going to be putting stuff in that development project that we looked at. And once they think it's ready for production, they can move it up to that user acceptance testing layer. And then lastly, probably our biggest group is our content viewers. So those are just the folks that are going to go out and use those production reports. The folks that are in there day-to-day, they're not really building stuff, but they're getting important information from it. Those are typically your stakeholders, usually your biggest group. So where do you want to manage those groups? You've got a couple options here. You can create local groups on your Tableau server, and you can manage who belongs to the groups there. Now, this was the approach I took for a lot of reasons that I won't get into, but essentially, this gives your site admin control over who belongs in a group. You can also consider extending some of these responsibilities to your project leads. In my case, we went through and built an extension that allowed project leads to assign folks to groups, but that's not a default feature in Tableau out of the box. But it can be done. The other approach you can take, if you're syncing to Active Directory and you already have these groups there, you can just sync those groups up to Tableau. So just like you would all your users, if you're syncing to Active Directory, you can do the same thing with the groups. And you can have someone who has permissions in the Active Directory update those groups so that they're managing who belongs in each of them. As we set up these groups, we want to be really careful about how we name them. Make sure you establish some standards ahead of time. Otherwise, everybody's got their idea about how they think something should be structured, which is great. But when you're managing a lot of people, you have to come to some kind of consensus so it's clear for anybody looking at these what each of them are. The approach I took was any of these groups were based on the project name and what role they had. So in this case, it would be the operations group, and the content viewer would be a member of those viewers. All right. And what does this look like when we put it all together? Because I know that's a little bit dry when I went through so far. So you want to make sure that this becomes part of your deployment methodology. You want to integrate these roles and the projects. So make sure that if you're doing an agile approach, maybe you have Scrum meetings on a regular basis, that this just becomes part of those in that regular schedule, right? When you're doing your stand-ups, when you're deciding at the end of your Scrum what goes to production, what goes back, you just make this part of it so that you're actively in Tableau with this in front of you. And you can also integrate things such as Jira for this if you want to. But at the end of the day, that project leader, remember they're the one responsible for everything that goes into production. They could be, if you have a Scrum Master, that could be the Scrum Master or a project manager. But typically they're the person leading those Scrums. They're also the one that's actually moving the content at the end of the day. So we've set up our groups and our projects, but I want to talk a little bit about permissions, because we can say like, hey, you shouldn't update stuff in production, but we want to ensure that no one can update stuff in production. So what I would highly recommend is that you lock your permissions to your project. And what this will do is any content that exists in that project is going to have the permissions set at the project level. So if I move something into a project, it's not going to keep its old permissions. It's going to have that project's permissions applied to it. So my top level, it just says production data. Only one person can change it. We all remember who that is, right? It's the project leader. The leader. There we go. Thanks. So you want to make sure that you've set these up appropriately. And this is also going to apply to those other stages as well, because each stage is going to have its own unique set of permissions for each of the groups. What's this look like? So the project leader can do anything. So they can go in and they can change things at the top layer. They can change things in UAT. They can change things in development. Now, ideally, probably don't want your project leader messing around with stuff in development or UAT on a normal basis. They would only be responsible for moving things, but they do have that ability. The content developers, on the other hand, are a little trickier. We want to make sure that they can publish stuff in that development folder. So as they're working on things, publishing it to the server, seeing how it performs, testing it, all that's going to happen in development. Once they're done with that phase, they can move it up into UAT. Once it's in UAT, though, it cannot change, because if you change something after you sign off for UAT, then guess what? You just promoted something that wasn't approved because it changed after it was approved. So in UAT, no changes happen there. The only one who can make changes in UAT is that project leader, and that change would be to either push that up or back down to development. And then at that top layer, no one can make changes there except the project leader. So anybody that's a content developer, they're locked down. It's basically a view-only role once it reaches that phase. And then for your content viewers, keep life easy for them. Don't even let them know that development exists. Hide the project from them. When it comes to UAT, this is a little bit, depends on how you want to structure things. I would consider hiding that one too, unless you have viewers who are your UAT approvers. So you might have some folks across different departments or different groups that you say, I want you to go in and look at this and tell me you think this is okay before I move it to production. So if you have folks like that, you'll give them the permission to see that stuff in UAT. You just need to make sure you communicate clearly. It's not in production if it's in that UAT folder. And then, of course, they have their normal permissions at that top layer, that production folder, and our example here, that operations folder. So they can view and interact with that content there. So what's it look like in action? If we're a content creator, I'm going to create my dashboard in Tableau Desktop, and I'm going to publish that to the development folder. Once it leaves Tableau Desktop and gets published to development, I can update it and I can republish it to development. But essentially from here, the next phase is it's going to move up to that UAT folder. So when it's ready, I'm going to move it up to UAT, and that's a signal to anybody in my Scrum team, my project manager, or whoever it is that's responsible for this stuff. Hey, I'm ready for folks to look at this, review it, and tell me if it's good or not.
Question.
Yeah.
You set up notifications that when it does move, that the people who need to go look at it can be notified that it's there?
So you could script a notification or something like that, but typically that's why you want your folks who are doing those regular stand-ups to be just part of the Scrum meeting. Yeah. And then once it gets here, this is going to be pass-fail. So your project manager is typically going to oversee what is going on. Your UAT testers will be like, it's good or it's not good, give feedback. If it's good, it goes up to that top level, and we're all happy. If it's not good, then it just goes back down to development. Now that it's back in that development folder, my content creators can go and edit it. They can change it again, they can update it and address whatever was found in that last review. And then once they're comfortable with it, they can update it, move it back up to UAT and try again. And as I mentioned before, viewers just have one place to go, essentially. That top layer, they might be doing UAT. That's it. So additional considerations, what I just gave you was kind of a overall structure for how to set this up. Just make it part of your regular cycle when you're creating content and promoting it. But I would strongly recommend you consider capturing revision history. That's a setting for every site. You can set this up so that you can always roll back to a previous version. And since all we're doing on the server is moving it, it's not changing it to a new piece of content. It's going to keep its revision history. And if we need to roll back, we have that history there. So I highly recommend keeping the revision history on for any of these. And then lastly, tag your content. I feel like tags are highly underutilized and they're actually pretty powerful. Make sure that you tag content for if you want to tell people what it's about. You can even use it as part of your cycle where you say, work in progress, tag for things that are actively being developed or alternate versions of things that you might want to indicate, like, don't move this. It's in development, but I'm still testing it out and we're not ready to go to UAT yet. So why are we doing all this? So for your server and site admins, you can manage your infrastructure instead of your users and your content, which was one of my primary goals. So I could focus on doing visualizations, building dashboards, and being more involved with the user group instead of nagging people about redundant content or things that were stale. Your project leaders, they get control of the content. So they're responsible for it, and they don't have to call up the site admin or somebody who might not have any connection to that content. Instead, they're the ones signing off. They're the ones that are responsible for it, and they have complete control. So you kind of allow IT or IS to get out of their way so that they can promote things and share insights that they're finding. It also provides a standard path for any of that content promotion. And then for our content creators, they know what they need to do. They can create content in a structured system, so they don't have to guess about where to put things. It's very obvious where things go and what the path is to get things from development into production. And lastly, our content viewers, if you're granting them access to UAT, they have transparency into what might be coming down the pipe. So if you have updates or things and they want to see a preview, they don't want to be surprised when something goes to production, They can see it there, and it gives them a clean and clear production content so that they don't have to worry about whether or not something is complete when they're looking at it. And that wraps it up.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. I guess in this process, I mean, how many people do you see use the nested versus maybe having a separate like dev project versus production? Because I've seen that as well. Like,
Yeah.
have you taken a poll? Like, what's the split? Or would you?
Yeah, I don't know what the split is, but yeah, that's definitely an approach I've seen as well, where you could have either dedicated development and UAT projects. The problem with that is when you have a lot of different production level projects that you're going to, which one goes where, right? It's easy to lose track. So then the solution is usually, oh, well, I'll just tag the dev or UAT with the production project name, which at that point, like, just make them nested projects. Seems easier to me, but you could do that. The other thing too I've seen is, I mentioned you can have as many phases as you like. Some people like to have a production project in that top level project. That's fine too. It just seems like an extra step, and if your viewers only see production, they're probably like, why do I have to go 2 folders down to get to production?
Too many extra lists.
Yeah.
On those project folders, did you find out scripting those, or was that something you created manually, like every time?
In my case, we wound up scripting a lot of this stuff. We used Jenkins to facilitate a lot of the promotion. So we would go through a process, and in Jenkins, you can log who approvers are and all that stuff. We also had ties back into Jira. So we were basically like self-documenting as we rolled anything out. So yeah. You can script a lot of cool stuff in Tableau. It's not that hard. So
Maybe that's the next presentation.
yeah.
Any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
So, Tableau in this project hierarchy, does it support as many levels as you want?
Yeah. And for those, if they didn't hear on the call, can you support as many levels as you want in the project hierarchy? Yeah, with nested projects, you can have, I don't know that there's a limit. I don't believe there is. I've seen as many as 12 deep, which gets a little confusing once you're that deep, in my opinion. But yeah, you can have nested projects under nested projects under nested projects.
Because you have like maybe divisions and groups, and then products underneath their dashboards and other things.
Yeah.
Is there one compelling reason though why you have your operations directory for production above the other folders rather than at the same level?
Yeah. So the question was, is there a reason to have that production folder or operations in the example I showed above the other ones? One of the reasons is when you name those folders, if it's always called development, right, and UAT, they can't exist at the same level. So if you have multiple projects, you can't have the same projects named the same at the same level. So if that makes sense. So by using those standards, you're able to name each of those phases the same and keep them under their own vertical, right, for whatever group you want them to be for. But if you wanted to create a hierarchy, say you have sales and you have multiple sales divisions, and each of them has their own nested project and their own content promotion cycle, you could do that as well.
And you mentioned you use Jira, and you use that for configuration management, branches and merges, and things like that. Or
Yeah.
do people use Git for that?
You could use Git. Yeah. You could use Git. We did integrations we never did Git. We did Bitbucket. We did integrations with Jenga. We used the Tableau Server client quite a bit. Yeah. And then we had originally used PowerShell for a lot of our stuff. We ended up moving it to Python eventually. So when it came to setting up those projects, instead of, as I mentioned, you set up your default now, what we would do is we had an approval process, and once the approver signed off, it automatically went out, scripted the whole thing, and created that project, set permissions for whoever the person on the approval in Jenkins was in Tableau. Yeah.
But within development, if you have multiple people on a team, you want to be able to have branching, merging.
Oh, branching and merging. Yeah, Tableau.
Or does it not get that?
Yeah, it doesn't really get that complex. You can do it, and I've seen it done. At the end of the day, Tableau is essentially XML files, and you're those dashboards. So if you wanted to use branching and merging as a way to develop, you can. It's really not a best practice. Sometimes you get weird results when you merge things. If you're
Well, I'm thinking like in a dashboard, I mean, you're collecting each individual object into one canvas, one palette.
yeah,
So you want to treat those separately, but the dashboard itself has a unique configuration of this revision of that chart, that revision of that chart, that revision of that chart. And then if you want to make an update, but just to that one chart, then essentially the dashboard goes into a branch, you make the update and then the merge. And
Right.
it becomes then the next revision of the dashboard.
yeah.
Do people use that kind of approach?
So yeah, I attempted it before with varied success. Since they are just XML, right? It's possible. Sometimes you just get weird, funky stuff based on the way they're structured, where things break and it's not clear why once you go back and do that merge.
But if you're controlling that, the whole point of that is that when you break it, you can always go back to a previous configuration.
Oh, yes.
And you know, at least that works. That's
You
the
can.
stake in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I ended up doing probably about half the time when I tried to do content that way. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Chris, back to you.
All right.
Thanks.
Ben, round of applause. All right. So everybody, thank you. Here, let me go ahead and make sure we're sharing. Perfect. Well, I want to thank everybody again for attending. Everybody that's been with us virtually, thank you again as well. So we'll be having our next event in a month on March 9th. So stay tuned for that. And also just a reminder, we're going to have our happy hour here right after this as well. So we'll be making our way across the street. So thank you all, everyone that attended virtually, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Yay. All right, cool.